I think everyone can learn more about what their rights are. It's fundamental to how you conduct yourself. It's crucially important to knowing if you've been wronged and what your avenues of finding some kind of recourse ultimately are. And listen, not everybody's an attorney, not everybody's read the Bill of Rights and fully understands it, but it's crucial to you as a citizen, as a individual, as a sentient being who has rights, human rights, fundamental rights. You got to know your rights. And in order for that to happen, sometimes there are groups that out there, they put on free seminars that can help you better understand those things. And we talk now with a couple of individuals involved with a Know Your Rights seminar that's coming up here very soon. Larry Hemingway with the Springfield Urban League, and also Jaaz Catterall, an attorney. You guys are going to be telling us how people can get more involved with knowing how their rights impact them. So, Larry, let's start with you. Tell us what we got coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg, for opportunity really just to share. Springfield Urban League has been doing a few series, actually, with one of our partners, Land of Lincoln, Legal Aid, and this will be another part of the Know Your Rights series. We understand that, like you say, knowing your rights is definitely important, but how do you know if you don't go to law school? And so we have our partner, my partner in rhyme here, Jaaz, is going to talk a little bit about this series that's coming up actually on tomorrow.
Yeah. So you guys have already had issues about housing law. You've talked about consumer law. Jaaz, talk about education law.
So this one coming up tomorrow, we actually had to reorganize a little bit. And so we're going to be doing the housing law one coming up tomorrow on November 22nd at 5:30. We're going to talk about a few of the most important things that tenants can learn about their rights, and especially rights and responsibilities too. So things like entering a lease, what you need to know as and before you enter a lease, what you can do if you need to get repairs at your house or your apartment, and then looking forward to kind of some specific rights people may have when it comes to public housing or Section 8. And what you need to know if you find yourself coming up into the eviction process and some of the rights that you do still have even as that process is getting started.
You know, we always hear about your First Amendment rights, your Second Amendment rights, your right to not have to house a soldier, which... Who really does the quartering anymore? But we always hear about those types of things. But I think what you're getting at here is more of the minutia that especially for those who rent, what are your rights? Do you know what your rights are? And is that something that also is kind of based off of state law? Is it different state by state?
Yeah, so a lot of this really does differ from state to state, and then even some local cities and municipalities will have their own ordinances. So somebody moving to Springfield from Chicago, for example, the laws are going to be a little bit different there. Most of what we're going to be focusing on is Illinois state law, because that's primarily what's followed in Sangamon County and in the Springfield area. And like you said, that is different, too, from state to state, where I moved here from North Carolina back in the beginning of the summer, and the laws in North Carolina are very different in a lot of ways. There's some similarities, of course, but each locale really does have its own area, and that's why it's important. Even if you have moved somewhere and you had a pretty good handle on what was going on before, it never hurts to come out and just brush up and see what might have changed now that you moved to Springfield.
So the Land of Lincoln Legal Aid putting together Know Your Rights in partnership with the Springfield Urban League coming up tomorrow, 5:30 to 6:30. So an hour presentation about housing rights and laws concerning housing and being a renter. And this is all going to be taking place where at, Larry?
It will be taking place at our Workforce Development Office, which is 512 South 11th Street. Again, 512 South 11th. And I say that because we have three offices on 11th Street. There's our Cook site, which is on 11th and Cook, our main office, which is on 11th and Washington, and we're right in the middle, which is, again, 512, across the street from the old DCFS building, and that will be our location, 512 South 11th Street.
So make sure you get out there, especially if you are curious about what your rights are as somebody who's renting and what other types of housing issues you might run into. We of course had a lot of different things happen during the pandemic where people kind of got a rapid understanding of what maybe their rights were as we had the eviction moratorium in place, but all that's been lifted. Does that kind of feed into why this particular session is so important, Jaaz?
It does, and that's part of why we really want to have this now again. Is I was just in eviction court the other day, and it was one of the highest number of people coming into that court that we had seen. It was really difficult for people to even have a chance to take the time to understand what was going on before their case was called, and then before they were maybe sent out the door without a house. And so we want to make sure that people have access to that type of information before any of that gets going. One of the things that, even though the eviction moratorium has been lifted, that a lot of people may not be aware of is that there is still some court-based rental assistance available out there. And that's something that's been huge both for tenants but also for landlords, because it gives landlords an opportunity to get some of that rent money that otherwise they may not have. Most tenants, when they're not paying their rent, it's not because they don't feel like paying rent. It's typically because it's not there to be paid. And so this is an opportunity for landlords to make up some of the back rent, perhaps, that has been owed, and also then to get 3 months at least of future rent going forward. And so that's something we're going to talk a little bit about in the presentation, but it's something that I just want everyone to be aware of if they're starting to go through the eviction process, that if it's for non-payment of rent, that is out there. It's a consistent funding source. There are lots of different programs providing some amounts of rental assistance here and there and some charity care in that. One of the perks to this one is it is through the court system, so it's consistent, and it really does come through most of the time for most people, especially if their non-payment is COVID-related at any point.
It's Jaaz Catterall. He is with the Know Your Rights educational seminars, and also Larry Hemingway with us here in studio from the Springfield Urban League. Jaaz, when it comes to that financial assistance, I know that we've the state of Illinois, through federal tax dollars, more than $1 billion worth of financial assistance to those renters, going directly to landlords. I know there were, I want to say 3,000 or so that went directly to the tenants because landlords weren't responsive. So there was an avenue set up for that. So when it comes to tomorrow's event, is it just for tenants, or should landlords also take part in this?
So we're directing, it's about tenants' rights. We're focusing on the tenants' rights, but it never hurts if a landlord wants to come out and learn. I mean, especially a lot of these times, you'll see some mom and pop landlords out there that they're wanting to respect the rights of everyone involved, but it's hard to do if you don't know what they are. So we will not turn anyone away. For landlords to learn kind of about what some of these processes look like, I think would be really helpful to tenants as well, especially regarding things like the repair process, what to look for when you're entering a lease. That can be helpful for both landlords and tenants to know. So it's focused on tenants' rights. Landlords more than welcome.
Yeah, I was going to say landlords, it'd probably be good to know what your tenants' rights are, yes, so that you don't find yourself in court facing somebody like Jaaz who knows what's going on with tenants' rights. Gentlemen, can you stick around just a little bit more and talk a little bit about what some of the other events were like and maybe what's ahead in the future? Yeah, so stay tuned. Just a brief break here. We'll talk more with Jaaz Catterall and also Larry Hemingway from the Springfield Urban League. It's here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Back with Springfield's Morning News, talking about an upcoming seminar that's taking place tomorrow, Know Your Rights, presented by Land of Lincoln Legal Aid and the Springfield Urban League. Joining me in studio, Larry Hemingway from the Springfield Urban League, and an attorney who's helping give us more information about what to expect at tomorrow's event, Jaaz Catterall. And again, this is an event that's going to be taking place tomorrow, 5:30 to 6:30, 512 South 11th Street here in Springfield. It's a free event for you to know your rights, and they're focusing on tenant law and how you can know your rights in housing law. And we'll touch on that here briefly at the tail end, but I do kind of want to talk just briefly, if we can, what you guys have already discussed in these types of events, but also what's ahead in the future. So, Larry, maybe what the Springfield Urban League has set ahead for the future.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And so we have done these series of seminars with Land of Lincoln Legal Aid to be able to provide these, again, free seminars for those who are willing to come gain the knowledge. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to tap into Jaaz's, I guess, the
expertise,
the knowledge. There we go, the knowledge.
Yeah.
Instead of paying them, $200 an hour for the information, we get it for free.
Jaaz, you all right with that?
I am all right with that. We provide free legal services to everybody all the time. So.
Well, and again, you talked about consumer law already. You're going to be looking at doing another one focusing on education law, and especially when it comes to learning about accommodations that parents can get for their kids for individual education plans and school discipline. These are all very important, crucial things that parents need to know about their students' rights when they're going to school. So that's an event coming up, and definitely, Larry, keep me posted on if we can talk about that again and let people know. But again, tomorrow is the Know Your Rights when it comes to housing law, and they're going to be focusing on when you enter a lease, what are your rights? When you are looking at eviction, what are your rights? So Jaaz, kind of finish up here if you can. For people who can't make it tomorrow, what are the major takeaways that you're hoping people walk away with?
Yeah, so I'd say the top 3 things I really want people looking at renting a property to know. The first is, if at all possible, get a written lease. I know sometimes people are really rushing. They're getting into a situation where they may not have as much pull over the situation as they'd want to have. Landlord might say, I'm not going to give you a written lease. If at all possible, a written lease is really important. A lot of what Illinois housing law is based on is what is in that lease. And so if there's nothing in the lease, it's really, really flexible, and that's not always a good thing for tenants. So get a written lease is step 1. Number 2, when it comes to repairs and things that need to be fixed in the house, the home, you cannot withhold or refuse to pay rent because repairs are not done, generally speaking.
I see that a lot on social media, people complaining about their landlord, and they even proclaim, I am not going to pay until this heater gets fixed.
And it makes sense, because if you're in December in Illinois and you don't have a heater, and lots of times people have to go live somewhere else for a month or so, and they can't afford to pay rent 2 places. It is a natural urge to say, okay, well, I'm not going to pay rent until this is fixed because it's not somewhere I can live. But generally speaking, again, there are some rights that tenants do have regarding repairs, and we're going to cover those in more detail tomorrow. But the most important thing is that it is very possible to be evicted for not paying rent, even if the reason you're not paying rent is that you can't live in the house.
So that's just some of what you're going to hear tonight, or no, tomorrow night. All right, so November 22nd, tomorrow night, 5:30 to 6:30, 512 South 11th Street. Larry Hemingway with the Springfield Urban League. Thanks for taking time with us today.
Hey, thanks for having us.
And Jaaz Catterall, an attorney who's going to be providing all of this information. Greatly appreciate your time as well. And let's talk again in the future, all right? And definitely tell people about the other upcoming Know Your Rights events with the Springfield Urban League and Land of Lincoln Legal Aid. All right, it's right here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News.